Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are looking at the Wambundu class. All right, try to say that really fast. All right, this is a light cruiser. Now, starting off here with the Strom Institute, they do not have a lot of information for this, and I went through a couple different other websites that, again, I did not get a lot of information. Now, we do have some information here. Now, the USS Wambundu, which is an active class and is the prototype. Then we also have the USS Drake, which was destroyed, as well as the USS Fleming. Now, um, beyond that, we don't have all that much else here. Moving on over to our next stop here, they show the Wambundu class as a kind of standard Federation style vessel, as a light cruiser. Now, beyond that, we don't have anything else listed here as far as an actual picture to say for sure that that is exactly what it is. What we do have now, unless that maybe is because they do reference, I believe it's Last Unicorn Games. Uh, the Wambundu class was a type of Federation light cruiser starship in service in the 24th century from the Star Trek Encyclopedia. The history, the Wambundu was a class of ship built in 24th century. By the 2360s, the Wambundu vessels were in service as light cruisers with some ships equipped as medical transports. Now, this comes from the Next Generation episodes, The Arsenal of Freedom and Force of Nature, which is where we get the USS Fleming and the USS Drake. Beyond that, we don't have anything listed here. Um, Now, when I did a Copilot search, it came up with this. So, the Wambundu class is a type of Federation light cruiser starship that served in the 24th century, known for its speed and versatility, with some vessels converted into medical transports. In general, the Wambundu class was introduced in the early 24th century and primarily served as a light cruiser within the Federation fleet. By the 2360s, these vessels were operational with some specifically equipped for medical transport duties. The class is named after the prototype ship, the USS Wambundu. Now, the purpose, designed for speed and efficiency, the Wambundu class was not intended for heavy combat, but could indeed engage in skirmishes when necessary. Armament, the class features an excellent torpedo performance, although linear phasers were still under testing during its introduction in 2332. Operational history, while many of the 412 ships built were decommissioned by the late 2360s, some were reactivated due to the increased demand during a conflict such as the Dominion War. The class has had a relatively low loss rate during wartime, with only 14 vessels lost, indicating their resilience in combat situations. Roles and usage: most Wambundu class ships were utilized for border patrol duties, but a number were converted into medical transports and hospital ships, reflecting their versatility in numerous operational roles. The class was once commonplace in the Federation, showcasing its importance in maintaining peace and security in space. Let's see, we have the Advanced Starship Design Bureau, which is where we're going to go to next. In summary, the Wambundu class represents a significant part of Starfleet's history, balancing speed and functionality while adapting to the needs of the Federation during its service. Now, getting over to our advanced design here. All right, so we do have designs and schematics as a light cruiser with a length of 195 meters, a beam of 85 meters, and a height of 29 meters, giving it approximately 6 decks. This is going to have a max cruising speed of warp 8 and a max warp speed of 9, warp 9 for about 7 minutes. Not very long at all. All right, our orthographic view, which gives us a nice view here, kind of looking more of a shuttle-ish take. Um, I don't know if it would be like an early runabout kind of design, something that kind of parts a little bit from our standard Starfleet design. More along the lines of this would just be like the engineering section in a lot of regards. Just looking at it in that regard. All right. So the Drake was designed or was destroyed by ancient weapons at the planet of Minos in 2364. The USS Fleming was one of the first starships to demonstrate just how dangerous old style warp drives can be to subspace during the 2370s by the Her- Hercaceus corridor. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. And if I do remember, in that episode, they were talking about the corridor when ships were traveling at higher speeds than warp, I want to say warp 5. They would start leaving a little bit of a breakdown thread in the warps or the warp space continuum or something like that, and started really kind of wreaking havoc in navigational corridors. All right, so the Wambundu class is Starfleet's middle-aged light cruiser. It was designed with speed in mind and packs a punch, though no longer considered a frontline vessel. While torpedo performance is excellent, linear phasers were still being tested by the time of this class's introduction in 2332. They were not deemed as necessary addition, as the ship was obviously intended to avoid heavy combat unless a wartime situation arose. At one time quite commonplace within Federation, most of the 412 ships built of this class had been decommissioned by the late 2360s. The recent troubles Starfleet had faced on many fronts has seen the need for newer builds and older ships being recommissioned. So the remaining 138 Wambundu classes starships were given a stay of execution and, in fact, bolstered by the reactivation of several older units. Aside from the Cardassian War a few decades ago, these ships had never seen heavy combat. Contrary to popular belief, they held up very well given the situation of the Dominion War, with a loss of only 14 vessels of this class. Among the lowest wartime loss rates in the fleet for mid-class or mid-sized starships. Most Wambundu class ships served on the border patrol, though a number were converted into medical transports and hospital ships. There is one shuttle bay at the rear, akin to those found on the Miranda class starships. It is supplemented by a smaller shuttle slash cargo bay on deck 7 in the aftmost section of the hull's undercut. Let's see. The class also features an innovation not employed on any other starship class, the experimental at the time impulse side slip jet system, in order to provide the long and lean starship with maneuverability to match its then incredible speed. Four of these units were incorporated into the design to give incredible dodging capability. Two on top, the other on the ventral surface of the ship, while not as powerful as the standard impulse drive, which propels from the rear of the ship. They can be turned to provide additional or emergency thrust in variable vectors. During the limited skirmishes in which these ships engaged, enemies rarely had a chance to lock a target, but if one was acquired, chances were the Wambundu could sidestep the incoming hostile fire. More recent improvements in thruster technology have approached this maneuverability, but not the sheer force and brute speed of it, which incidentally, if overdone, can irreparably damage the starship's superstructure. The Dominion has had more luck in damaging Wambundus, uh, but many starship captains swear by their class motto, "Catch me if you can." So the gallery that we have shown here, design credits do go to Jason, and as they're kind of coming up with their design sketches, having the sensor pod as a kind of a Mirandish kind of style add-on pod, and having the aft photon torpedoes, as well as shallow undercut, small shuttle bay, kind of listed here. Let's see, their notes do show that the Wambundu class, 180 meters in length, 4 decks, 30 crew, 4 Type 5 phaser turrets, 4 photon torpedo launchers, 50 torpedoes stocked, max cruising possibly an 8, and a emergency of warp 9 for about 7 minutes. Now that was their proposed sketch here. Another sketch shows another view of this, keeping the same lines that they had done before, and then we get a colored drawing of it, which does look pretty good. And of course, then when we get back up to our orthographic, that does show the same design sketch here. All right, with that, let's get on over to the stats that I've kind of created here and see what we've done. All right, so looking at what we have here today, now the Wambundu class being a light cruiser slash patrol vessel, length of 195 meters, a width of 85 meters, and a height of 29 meters. Now the ship mass being roughly about 55,000 metric tons. Taking a stab at the dark at this. Now, for our lengthwise, that does put us at a starship size of 5. Now, we do have an autopilot of 2D plus 2, crew of 150. Now, this is quite a bit larger than what they were originally seeing, of like 39 or so. Um, just kind of looking at it and going from there. Um, Being a combat ship or whatever, you might want that extra personnel trying to maintain the speed and maneuverability of actual combat maneuvers. All right, skeleton crew is going to be 15 with a plus 10 to all operations. Now, we do have a passenger count of roughly about 20, so we can ferry some passengers around. Cargo capacity is going to be roughly about 50,000 metric tons. You know, a big oversized shuttle in those regards. Now, consumables, looking at maybe about a year. If this is doing patrol missions, they're usually going to be well within a couple different star bases or so, something that they can actively go back and forth. Now, warp drive being a standard warp of 6.5, a max rated is 8, or a max warp would be 8, and max rated would be warp 9 for about 7 minutes. This would be atmospheric capable, having an atmospheric speed of 600 kilometers per hour. Of course, we're going to have our nav computer. Our maneuverability, I have this roughly sitting about a 2D. Now, it does say that this would be a little bit more maneuverable, so maybe we should actually raise that up to like a 2D plus 2. Um, so we'll just kind of do that. I'm a little hesitant to try and put it up to a 3D, mainly because in a lot of the other ships that we have listed here, um, and I'm taking this more from what D6 Holocron had come up with, using theirs as the basis. Uh, they don't, go to such big extremes there, so I really don't want to go too far out of their norm. Plus, using the design that the kind of workings that they've come up with, trying to keep things well within that design parameters. Now we do have a space speed of 8, denoting that it is a faster vessel. We do have a hull strength of 2D plus 1 and a shield strength of 1D plus 2. Now our sensor packet gives us passive scanning out to 4 kilometers with a 1D plus 1 bonus, an active scan out to 12 kilometers at a 2D bonus, an active search out to 15 kilometers with a 3D bonus, and a focused search out to 500 meters with a 3D plus 2 bonus. Now, looking at what we have for phaser arrays being an early workings of this, we do have 4 Type 6 phaser arrays. Fire control is 2D, rate of fire is going to be 3, and damage is 2D plus 1. Now, I wanted to keep the rate of fire a little bit lower, seeing that this is still, at that time, a little bit newer technology, a little bit more experimental. Um, so I didn't want to go overboard on that. Now, we do have 2 Type 2 photon torpedo launchers, keeping it roughly about that time frame-ish. So that gives us a fire control of 2D, a spread of 3. We do have a damage of 4D. Now, when I originally did this, I had ammunition of 50 or 15 Type 2 photon torpedoes. But looking at their design sketch, and it is being noted as being a good missile platform, I figured I'd bump that up to 50 Type 2 photon torpedoes. But some of the differences here, in their early design sketches, they had 4 photon torpedo launchers. I only have 2. So please keep that in mind here. Um, with a smaller ship like this, if you feel it really needs to have 4, by all means, change it to 4. I don't know if I would go above 50 photon torpedoes, though. I think I would leave that alone. Just kind of mentioning that. Now we do have the standard with a 2 class Delta tractor beams with a strength of 40 plus 2, 1 forward, 1 aft, as well as the class Alpha tractor beam for our shuttle bay with a strength of 3D. Now I didn't do a lot with the crew quarters, so a lot of this stuff is kind of way off. I did make sure I changed the decks to 6. I did kind of mean to get through and change out like the escape pods and all that. So I just took from Renaissance, ported it over, and started going line by line. So really, we're looking at barracks probably being what 150, so probably 100. Basic being probably about say 25. Whoops. Um, our expanded would probably be about 10. Oops. No, we're going to keep that at 20. And let's see, we're going to need what 170 in all. So I'm going to have to up luxury. I think we're going to have our luxury at 5. So that's 150. Let's get basic another 20. So let's take that to 40. All right. So that would roughly give us what we're looking for. I'm going to need about there. Just changing things up here. 100 escape pods for a capacity of 4. Transporters, I changed all that. I made sure I went through all that. So we do have 2 personal transporters for a 6-person capacity, 2 emergency transporters with a 22-person capacity, and one cargo transporter for a 400 kilogram capacity. Now, our shuttlecraft is going to be two shuttlecraft, one shuttle pod, and 40 probes. Seeing that this is going to be a smaller ship, a little bit more constricted in those regards. Um, and I think that kind of wraps this up pretty good. You know, it is an earlier kind of take of a for the design, like a runabout, um, kind of like a budget light cruiser in that regard. Um, and sometimes like with the Freedom class and so on and so forth, we see that they're using the standard saucer and they just have like a single nacelle in the back. This is a departure from a lot of that, but again, I've seen other instances where they used essentially just the engineering section, kind of like what they were doing with the Enterprise D, but they still retained some of the neck, and you had a secondary kind of bridge in there. In this regard, it's almost like you're just taking a flat engineering section, just building up a uh, bridge net onto it, and just kind of running it from there, um, and just trying it out. Something small, something easy to build, something to kind of fill a gap that was probably seen at the time. Again, different shapes, different types of vessels, something to throw out there that's not just the standard norm. Sometimes it's fun to have. Sometimes people are going to look at it, and there are probably some of you out there that are saying you're never going to put this out in your own role playing game or in your own universe. You just don't want to accept that design, and that's fine. We don't always have to agree with that. It is a departure from the norm. I do agree with that, but it does fill a different type of role. So, just as a patrol vessel, a different type of look and parameters from what we're usually used to seeing. So, with that being said, thank you so very much for joining me today. It's always wonderful having you here. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you in the next video.